everyone. Welcome to In the Garden. I'm Joyce Heucheras, McLeod County Master Gardener. And this morning we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to take a look at some of the hostas that have unfurled completely now and catch them before the slugs get them and the sun burns them and the wind throws sticks through them. And we're going to talk a little bit about some nasties that can invade our garden too. So we'll get started. Over here, we're down, this is a bed near the road, and I have a lot of hostas that are getting more sun than they really should, but my new trees aren't big enough to shade them yet. And we'll see if I can keep these going until they are, or if I have to give up and change it to sun. But we've got some really neat hostas in here. Over here we have one called Streets of Gold. It starts out kind of a limey green, and this one actually prefers to have some morning sun. And these leaves, you can see the edges are starting to turn gold. You can kind of see the two-tone there where it's shaded or not. And this has just been a really fun one for me. And behind it we have Jurassic Park, which is very similar to Empress Wu, but the leaves have much thicker substance, so I've never had any slug damage on this one. They leave it alone. They go for the thinner leaved hostas. So that's kind of a fun one. Over here, we have, I believe this to be maybe elegance. I'm not sure. It's been here before I was here. And then we have one of my favorites, Montana Ario Marginata. It starts out with a bright yellow along the outer edge, which kind of fades to cream as the season progresses. But it's a really sharp one in the spring. And we'll move on along over this way. Over here we have one called Seducer, which makes a nice clump. I see I have a couple of solid leaves in here, which means I probably need to, this fall, dig this up and separate out those solid color eyes so it doesn't take over the whole clump. A lot of the variegated hostas will sometimes revert or sport sometimes too. So you need to keep an eye on that, or it can take over the whole clump. Not that sometimes you can just kind of cut them off too if you want to do it the lazier way. That works too. We're going to continue on around here. Down here we have Minuteman, which is a sportive patriot. And this little guy down here is called Golden Needles. I see I have to get this fern out of here that wants to take it over, but that's kind of a fun one to play with. One of the minis. I was hoping the martigons would start popping before we taped today, but no such luck. But we have the buds formed. They're almost ready to go. We're a little behind schedule this year. And then this is an oldie, but still a goodie. It's called Allegan Fog. It's got just really neat leaf patterns with the speckling on the leaf. It starts out lighter and it gradually gets a little darker as the season goes on. And then in here we have Goat's Beard, which I just love. This is one plant. So yeah, it's can get quite large. And this one is not quite as showy as the one I have by the gazebo, but the wind is a little strong over there today, so we'll try to get a shot of it, but you may not hear me talking about it there. But yeah, apparently there are male and females, and the male is the showier of the two. And unfortunately, you don't really know until you get them and they're blooming, so there is that. And then I'm going to go in here. Again, some more martigons that are so close, but just not cooperating with us today. And the wind is throwing a lot of debris around. This one, if you like Frances Williams, this is Olive Bailey Langdon. And she's got better leaf substance and isn't as prone to burning. Frances Williams gets a lot of spring burn on it, and the leaves just kind of, this one's got better leaf substance and it holds up better, so you don't get that. And then if you want some nice bright color, I think this is on, I have to look. I'm pretty sure this is on stage, but my tag seems to have been eaten by the hosta, so. But this was kind of a fun one. Not great leaf substance, so if you have a lot of slug pressure, this one might not be the best one for you. It's got a thinner leaf. So if you've got a lot of slugs, you want to look for ones with good leaf substance, heavier leaves. The slugs are less likely to go after them. And here we have some variegated Solomon seal. You do have to keep an eye on that. It does like to spread when it's in its happy place. But it is a native, and it's done blooming. You can see a few dried blooms down in there, but this one is done for the year. And right down in front of the camera, and I'm going to come over there, is June, which is probably one of my favorite hostas. June just always looks good. Doesn't matter, I mean, she's one of the last ones still looking great in the fall and first in the spring, so it's just always a fun one. So that's another one I'd certainly recommend. Over here we have Dancing Queen. It's got nice ripply edges and corrugation on here. And of course it's getting too much sun because I lost the tree right over there a couple of years ago, and I'm still waiting for others to grow up. It hasn't really burned too much, just a little bleaching here and there, but we'll live with that. And we'll move on this way. I like this one, is Midnight at the Oasis. And lesson to yourself, or a note to yourself, planting hostas with cupped leaves under a tree that sheds blooms equals a mess. So this is Midnight at the Oasis, and I love the dark green with the lighter green. And it pretty much holds that color all summer, where some are color changers. And we'll move over here to June Fever. And I see the slugs are starting to get at her, so no, June Fever is not real slug resistant, although it's not terrible either. But it's a nice, good grower, clumps up fast, and adds some bright color to your shade beds. Then we get down here to a Dwarf Solomon seal. Just the little guy, blooms just like the other one does with the white, tiny little white blooms, and makes a good ground cover too. It also is in its happy place, will spread quite prolifically. I took out a pretty large chunk of it this spring, and it's you wouldn't really know it. And back in here, this one is one of my favorites, both for the name and for the leaf shape. This one is called Whee! Behind it is bloodroot. I think the leaves are really interesting. It's long done blooming. That blooms way earlier. This is the double variety, but I just love the shape of that leaf. Now if it gets really hot and dry, it'll eventually go dormant for me, but that's okay. Then down here we have Lionheart. Again, you've got the dark, the nice blue of the leaf with a lighter green, and then the cream center. And that's got pretty good leaf substance too, so it really rarely gets slug damage. And behind it, that's probably in my top 10 with a yellowish border, is Liberty. It's been a little slower grower than some, but it's got good leaf substance, and the color is just incredible. So that's a favorite. This is, I think, Deja Blue, yep. Deja Blue, which is supposed to have a little white line between the light green and the blue. And talking to other hosta growers, it rarely does unless you have the absolute perfect condition for it. But it's still a nice hosta, so it stays. Maybe if I, have to move others into more shade, that one might go, but for now it's good. And this is, and I think this one is so aptly named, lakeside party dress. I just think the ruffles and the way the leaves turn and shimmer is just kind of like a little girl's party dress. And then we're going to talk a little bit about heucheras, because I've been having this conversation with a lot of people lately about how they always die. And I'm thinking, yeah, I've had that problem too. But I do have some that have done well for me. This one's probably been here almost 10 years. This is Cassandra. So it's kind of a neat one. And finally, I'm kind of getting to the place where if it lives and does well, it's a neat one. So that's my take on them. This one, I guess, is a little bit older. I put this one in first, but it's the same heuchera, Cassandra. And then we're going to walk on around to the other side. Here we have deep blue sea, which is a slower grower, but again, you've got that heavily corrugated leaf, and the slugs don't seem to like that as well. So it holds its blue color well into the season, where a lot of the blues, when it heats up, or if you have a real rainy year, the waxy coating, which gives you the blue color, kind of washes off or melts away. And this one holds it longer into the summer. Now, of course, it depends on the season. If we have 100 degrees for a week at a time, or rain every day, hard rain, it will wash off some, but it does hold the color pretty well. You can see these hostas are beginning to lose their battle with the elm tree here. They used to be much larger. They're kind of shrinking, and I thought about trying to dig them and move them out, but the roots down there are so intertwined that we'll just leave them and see what happens. I imagine, depends on who goes first, the tree or the hostas, but they are definitely shrinking in size now. Down here we have a couple more minis. They seem to like this spot. It's one of the more sheltered places I have on my property. This one is mini skirt down here. And then this is probably, I think, the first mini I bought was Pandora's box. And a lot of people say it's a very difficult one to grow, but apparently it likes Minnesota, or it likes my garden anyway, because I probably divided this one a dozen times over the last 10 years, so it's quite vigorous. The downside is with the minis, or at least with Pandora's box, the leaf substance isn't great, so slugs can be a problem for it. This bed isn't as bad as some of my others with slugs. And behind it we have Limey Lisa, which I got just because I liked the name. Thought it was a fun one. And over here we have Twist of Lime, which is a very vigorous grower. As you can see, clumps up fast. And it looks like I may need to do some dividing on this because we have some leaves reverting, so I'll have to take out those eyes. And down here we have Silver Threads and Golden Needles. This one is another really great hosta that gets nice and big with some nice variegation. I haven't had any problems with this one trying to revert. This is Sagae, and at least that's the people in the know tell me that's the correct way to pronounce it. It's spelled S-A-G-A-E, but they say it's Sagae, so you kind of think, you know, they could at least name it something that people can pronounce would be nice, but this one does very well. Good leaf substance, nice thick leaves, and a fun one to have, good grower. As you can see, I need to get some slug bait down. This is Emerald Rough Cut, a thinner leaf again, not as slug resistant as some of the others. But it's just, you can see maybe why it's named Emerald Rough Cut. It's got the almost emerald green edging, and then the edging, I don't even know how to describe the edging on these, but it's just a fun hosta. And then right behind it, and I think I need to switch these around one of these days, is Striptease, named because of the white streak in there. And that's another nice hosta. Good substance, very little slug damage, even on wet years. Here we have Regal Splendor, which is looking pretty good, except for what looks like Kind of looks like a deer noshed on it earlier in the season. But this is a nice, more upright vase-shaped one if you need something with a little more height in some areas. And it's a good grower with good leaf substance. And then next to it we have a Summon Substance. It's a little smaller than it was. I divided it down quite a bit last year. I had somebody who was desperately looking for Summon Substance, so I took off about half of the clump, so it was much larger, but that's one of the largest leaved ones. If I can, let's see, I'll put my hand on here just for a little bit of a size comparison. You know, we're talking dinner plate size here or larger on the leaf. This one is called Tickle Me Pink because of the petioles, so the red and kind of pinkish coloring in the stems. Now, since this one has come out, there have been a whole slew of new ones that have come out with even redder stems that extend even up into the edge of the leaf a little bit. But this is still a fun one, and this is one too where looks like either deer or bunnies, clean-cut bunnies, decided to sample it. So that's one way you can tell which it was. Deer will leave a ragged edge when they bite it off, and bunnies leave a clean cut because of their teeth. Okay, down here we have rubies and ruffles. Again, because of the red on the stem, so named. And we're going to talk, there's a couple more heucheras here that have actually not only survived but done fairly well. We've got one over here. I think this is, let's see. Yep, that is stainless steel. It's got kind of the pink, the newer leaves are more pink, and then as they age, you get more of a silver overlay on them. And that's one that not only survives, but actually looks pretty good. I have a few that are just hangers on that haven't quite, you know, that's the way it goes. Another heuchera that does seem to survive for me is Heuchera Pinot Gris, named after a wine. That one has done quite well. Again, a lot of the things in this bed are beginning to lose the battle with the tamarax trees over here, who are pretty big water seekers. Although I really don't want to get rid of the tamarax because I absolutely love the needles on these. They're so soft. This one is always a fun one. This is, yeah, that's what I thought. Rosedale's Golden Goose. And if, you know, I'd like to, for no other reason, I love the name. But it's got these nice chartreuse leaves, really heavy corrugation, a thicker substance so it doesn't have a lot of slug damage. And in front of it here we have Patriot, which I absolutely love, but those cupped leaves gather every dropped bloom from this hawthorn tree. And I've already washed these off twice, and I'll probably be doing it again because otherwise it leaves kind of brown stains on the leaves and they look not so nice for the rest of the summer. So the good, the bad, and the ugly of gardening. Down here we have Mayflower Moon. And again, I have dried flower heads on it, but so be it. That's part of gardening, I guess. Okay, we're going to talk about just a couple more heucheras that do quite well for me. One of them is Southern Comfort. And this is that one right here. It's kind of just some bronzes and yellows and greens kind of mixed together. And it's a fairly vigorous one. It not only, you know, comes back, which is always a plus here, but actually looks pretty good. I need to clear some iris out of there that have tried to grow into the clump, but that's a fun one. And then down here we have Amethyst Mist. And I really love the plummy ones too, have a little bit of a silvery overlay. This is a little similar to stainless steel, not quite. And then I think down here, this one ate its tag, so I'm not quite sure if it's another Amethyst Mist, just getting a little less sun, or a Frosted Violet. I think this is frosted violet. Quite similar, but this one seems a little more vigorous. And the last one over here is peach melba, which is getting a little bit, the heat the other day did a little bit of number on the leaves, so I'll have to snip out a few leaves here and there. This is Hosta tattoo. If you look really closely, the variegation forms the shape kind of roughly of a maple leaf. And it was a really big deal when it hit the market 20 years or so ago. And it's done okay for me. It's not a super vigorous plant, but I can't complain either. I have divided off of it a couple times for people, so. But yeah, it's just a fun little one. Okay, over here we have Blue Angel. This one, there are two clumps here. There used to be a tree in between them, which a Japanese tree lilac, which didn't make it. And we took that out, and when we took that out, of course, I still had a big willow over here to offer shade, which I lost a year or two ago. But when we pulled that tree out, these two clumps just exploded into one huge clump. And this has got the most beautiful white flowers. And I know you don't usually think about the flowers on hostas, but this one really does have pretty ones. And it's just a nice big, even with all the sun it's getting, it holds its blue color for a while. I mean, when you get 100 degrees and stuff, it's tough on it, but I'm hoping to get a little more shade going in here. And then over here, we have, behind it is Earth Angel, which gets pretty nice and big. And over here, Hanky Panky, which is, I believe, a sport of striptease. So it's kind of a fun one. Sometimes I just buy them for the names. And in here we have this thing that looks kind of like columbine or aqualegia. This is Thalictrum. And I'm trying to think, I think this one gets yellow flowers. Trying to find the tag here to see which one it is, but I don't see it at the moment. It's probably covered with mulch. But yeah, this is just kind of a fun one. Just a little to intersperse between the hostas and give a textural difference, because we've got some really heavy texture here and then some really fine. Here we have one called Devil's Advocate. Again, it's a little bit similar to Midnight at the Oasis, but the variegation is maybe not quite as intense between the blue and the green, but it's still a very nice, a very thick substance on the leaves, the hosta. And I'm kind of getting to where I'm thinking, okay, since I'm losing shade and I'm probably going to have to get some hostas out, I'm going to have to sit down, make a list, and which ones have the nice thick substance so I don't have to go around with slug bait and beer traps, and hang on to those and get rid of some of the others. This one with the kind of shiny leaf is called Jazz, and I just like the counterpoint to the light color with the dark. And here is a favorite over here, is called Lakeside Paisley Print. Between the wavy leaves and the variegation, I just love this one. And then before we close, I want to talk a little bit about some of the pests that are coming into our garden. You've probably heard about Asian jumping worms, so I just want to talk a little bit about those. And since we're in a spot where the wind isn't blowing us over here, I think I'll do it right here. You don't want them. If you don't have them, you don't want to get them. So far, they have not been reported in McLeod County, but that doesn't mean they aren't here. It just means that no one has found them yet, because they're all around us in Carver, Wright. They've been found up by St. Cloud and Stearns. Cities there is thick with them. So the best thing you can do is not get them into your gardens. And the way to do that is wash your plant roots. If somebody is sharing plants with you from their garden, even if they don't think that they have jumping worms, Wash off the roots. Leave the dirt where it came from. Don't move it. Don't move dirt. Wash those plant roots. In the spring, you won't see the worms because they die off at the end of the season. When we get a good hard freeze, the adults die. Unfortunately, they leave cocoons behind. And they are about the size of anywhere from 2 to 5 millimeters. And I've got a picture of one of those that will be included in that, so you can kind of watch for them in case you see them on your plant roots. But one of the surest ways to know is if your soil suddenly starts looking like coffee grounds, that's a good sign of jumping worms, because they go in, they eat up the humus and destroy the soil structure. And in some cases, they can kill the plants because they just totally take care of the nutrients. So you really don't want to get them in your garden, and I don't want to scare people to death, but use caution, use common sense. If you know you have jumping worms, don't share your plants with somebody, even if you've washed the roots, because it's just too easy to miss some of those eggs in the spring. And then they hatch about this time of year, or maybe a week or two ago, start growing over the summer, and they can get to anywhere from 1.5 inches to 7 or 8 inches long. So one way to tell them apart from our common European earthworm, which by the way is not native here either, but they don't do as much damage. They at least have the benefit of improving soil structure, even if they do damage our arboreal forests further north. So don't, if you're buying worms for composting or something like that, check to make sure there's no jumping worms mixed in there. They move in a very strong S pattern, like a snake. And if you pick them up, sometimes their tail will break off and the rest of them keeps going. Also the clitellum, which is, you know, earthworms have that kind of raised collar like around them. That's near the head. On the jumping worms, it's closer to the head. On the European earthworms, it's further back, and also the jumping worms, the collar is usually a paler color, a pale pink or grayish pink, where it's a darker pinkish purple on earthworms. So that's a couple ways to tell them apart. But wash the plant roots if you're moving them. Now I've been very, very careful. I have seen no signs of them, but I've still, for the last 2 or 3 years, I've pretty much been washing my plant roots when I move them. And not only am I getting rid of any possible things like that, I'm also getting rid of weed seeds and roots that I could be passing on to somebody else that they probably wouldn't appreciate. So if you have any questions on the jumping worms, there's lots of information on them out there. Like I said, I don't want to scare people into not gardening, but just use caution. If you can avoid getting them in your garden, you're much better off. You really don't want them there. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and we'll see you next time in the garden.